My godmother placed Marcus's apartment key on top of our marriage vows and said, "I stayed with him last night, and I did not leave before morning." The brass key struck the altar with a sound too small for the damage it carried. A white rose slipped from my bouquet and landed beside my shoe. Behind the third pew, a woman's program folded shut. My ears began ringing so sharply that the organ's final chord seemed to come from underwater. Marcus stood nearby, one hand near the Bible meant to hold our vows. He did not reach for the key. He looked toward Pastor Ellis, then toward the congregation, as though the order of service might still be rescued if the right person took control. What I saw on his face was not confusion. It was a frightened man trying to remember which version of himself the room had believed. And before Pastor Ellis could speak, I understood something that steadied me. The wedding had not been interrupted. It had been prevented. I was 52 when I stood at the altar of Greater Promise African Methodist Episcopal Church, preparing to marry a man the congregation called my answered prayer. Greater Promise was not a church I had joined because of Marcus. My family had worshipped there for 3 generations. My grandmother organized the first missionary pantry. My mother directed the youth choir. I learned to read from Sunday school cards there, and I learned to grieve in the same sanctuary after her funeral. My first marriage lasted 19 years. Thomas and I had loved each other with the kind of love that becomes quieter as life grows heavier. During the final years of his illness, our marriage revolved around medication schedules, appointments, and long nights when sleep came in pieces. When he died, I wanted quiet. I wanted a life in which no hospital corridor knew my footsteps. Marcus came to Greater Promise 2 years later. He was 44, divorced, soft-spoken, and director of Christian education. He taught Bible study with the confidence of a man who had learned how to sound humble in public. He remembered birthdays, carried folding chairs without being asked, and never prayed longer than the pastor. Marcus and I moved slowly. For 11 years, we built what I believed was a careful bond. We served meals after funerals, prayed with families in the fellowship hall, and sat through enough committee meetings to know how each other behaved when tired. He proposed in the church garden beneath the dogwood tree. By then, I believed time had tested him. My deepest desire was not simply to be loved again. I wanted to be chosen without being managed. With Marcus, I believed I had found companionship that did not require me to disappear into duty. What I did not understand was that some men behave best around people whose opinion they still need. My godmother, Dr. Celeste Howard, had stood beside my mother when I was baptized. She was not family by blood, but she had been present at every threshold. She sat with me through Thomas's funeral and was the first woman I called when Marcus proposed. She did not celebrate immediately. "Does he make room for your no?" she asked. I laughed softly. "That is your first question?" It is the question many women discover too late. Our premarital sessions took place in Pastor Ellis's office after Wednesday Bible study. Because this was my second marriage and Marcus's second, Pastor Ellis asked Celeste to join 2 sessions about grief, blended histories, and expectations. Marcus welcomed her involvement. "Dr. Howard knows her better than anyone," he said. I heard respect. I did not hear opportunity. The first time Celeste repeated a private fear, I assumed I had mentioned it and forgotten. The second time, I asked how she knew. "Marcus is concerned about you," she said. Concern can be a tender thing. It can also become a respectable way to cross a boundary. I told myself that 2 people loved me enough to compare notes. That was the first belief I later had to release. People who love you may seek wisdom. They do not build a private room around your life and call it care. The church wedding became important to Greater Promise before it became important to me. Celeste agreed to serve as my matron of honor. She chose ivory roses and purple irises for the altar and supervised the room where my dress and veil were stored. She knew every detail, including the vows I had written by hand. Marcus wanted the printed program to call our union a journey from loss to covenant. I removed that phrase. "My grief is not the opening chapter of your leadership story," I told him. He smiled, but his eyes tightened. "You always hear performance where I mean Testimony. And you sometimes call something testimony before asking whether it belongs to you. He did not answer. That disagreement should have mattered more to me. Instead, I praised myself for speaking and ignored the fact that my words changed nothing. A boundary that is repeatedly explained but never enforced can become another form of pleading. One Sunday, I found Celeste alone in the choir room, folding a cream handkerchief into smaller and smaller squares. "Are you worried about me marrying Marcus?" I asked. She looked toward the closed door. "I am worried that you believe peace means everybody around you is telling the truth." "Are you telling me the truth?" Her fingers stopped. "Not enough of it." I waited. She opened her mouth, but footsteps sounded in the hallway. Marcus entered, carrying a stack of lesson binders. His expression brightened too quickly. "There are my two favorite women," he said. Celeste stood and left without finishing the conversation. I followed her as far as the hallway, but Marcus touched my elbow. "Give her room," he said. "She is carrying something personal." He said it with such gentle authority that I obeyed. That was another truth I had to learn. Control does not always arrive as a command. Sometimes it arrives as an interpretation offered before you can form your own. Fresh flowers covered the altar during the final week before the wedding. They were so full and perfect that no one could see the foam and wire holding them upright. On Thursday evening, Celeste asked me to meet her in the church garden. Rain had passed an hour earlier. Water clung to the leaves, and the stone path looked darker than usual. She sat on the empty bench, but did not invite me beside her. "I need you to know I have failed you," she said. I thought she meant the planning meetings. "You have done more than enough." "That is not what I mean." Before she could continue, Pastor Ellis stepped through the side door. He looked from Celeste to me and seemed to understand that he had entered something private. "Marcus is looking for you," he told me. "The sound team needs a decision about tomorrow's recording." Celeste lowered her eyes. I touched her shoulder. "We will finish this after rehearsal." We never did. During the final run-through, I noticed a brass key attached to the zipper inside Celeste's handbag. A black leather tag carried the letter M. I recognized it because Marcus used the same tags for his apartment and office keys. The key rested in plain view for only a second before Celeste closed the bag. My body understood before my mind permitted the thought. I told myself it was a spare key for wedding supplies. I told myself Marcus had trusted her to retrieve something. I even told myself the letter could stand for ministry. Denial is not always ignorance. Sometimes it is intelligence forced to work against itself. Sister Laverne found me standing near the first pew after rehearsal. "You do not have to walk into tomorrow carrying a question you are afraid to ask," she said. I turned toward her. "What do you know?" "Nothing I can prove." "Then why say that?" "Because I watched your face when you saw Celeste's bag." I sat down. For a while, neither of us spoke. Finally, I said, "I have spent 11 years asking whether Marcus is safe enough to marry. I never thought to ask whether the people helping me decide were safe." Laverne took my hand. "Delay is not failure," she said. "A wedding can be postponed. A vow spoken against your own discernment is harder to retrieve. Communities sometimes protect appearance because too many people have invested in the picture. The picture begins to feel more valuable than the woman standing inside it. I went to Pastor Ellis's office and asked him to delay the ceremony until I could speak with Celeste. He listened, but he was cautious. "You have a concern, not a confession," he said. "Let us pray before we turn suspicion into a public wound." His answer sounded spiritual. It also placed the burden of restraint on me, the person with less information. Still, I agreed to wait until morning. Respectable women are often praised for remaining calm in rooms where calm benefits everyone except them. The next morning, Celeste did not come to prayer. Marcus arrived early and said she had called before dawn, sounding unwell. "Did she tell you why?" I asked. "She is overwhelmed by the day." "Did you see her last night?" His pause was brief. "I spoke with her." That was not my question. He set the coffee on the fellowship hall table. "This is exactly why I wanted us to finish counseling before the wedding. You can turn uncertainty into an accusation when you are frightened. There are sentences designed to answer a question. And there are sentences designed to make a woman ashamed that she asked it. I looked at him and felt something settle inside me. I will not defend the question, I said. You can answer it, or you can leave it unanswered. He adjusted his cuff. I spoke with her at my apartment. She was upset. Nothing happened that should threaten today. The phrase "nothing happened" did not comfort me. It only revealed that he had already decided which part of the truth I was allowed to call important. Before I could continue, members of the wedding party entered the hall. Marcus greeted them with warmth, and the private opening closed. I did not confront him again. That choice was not weakness. By then, I understood that another conversation would only give him more language to manage. I needed truth that did not depend on his willingness to provide it. 10 minutes before the processional, Celeste entered wearing her lavender suit. Her face looked older than it had the day before. She carried no flowers. "May I speak to you alone?" she asked. Before I could answer, the coordinator called for the bridal party. The sanctuary doors were opening. Celeste pressed her lips together and took her place behind me. The processional began. I walked down the center aisle beneath stained glass light, past church mothers in wide-brimmed hats and young women holding phones low against their programs. Marcus waited at the altar with Pastor Ellis. Then Pastor Ellis asked who presented me for marriage. Celeste stepped forward. She did not say, "Her church family and I do." Instead, she walked past me, reached into her handbag, and placed Marcus's apartment key on top of our handwritten vows. "I cannot present her to a marriage I helped betray," she said. The sanctuary stilled. Marcus whispered her name. Celeste kept her eyes on me. "I stayed with him last night," she said. "I was not there as your godmother or as someone counseling your marriage. I did not leave before morning. This was not the first time I crossed the boundary, but it is the last time I will help him make you doubt what you see." No one shouted. A child in the second pew turned toward his grandmother and asked why the music had stopped. She drew him close without answering. Marcus began speaking to the pastor. "This is not the place." I lifted one hand, not toward him, toward Pastor Ellis. "Please close the ceremony," I said. Marcus turned to me. "We need to discuss this privately." I did not answer. For years, I had believed dignity meant finding the calmest words in the room. That morning, dignity meant refusing a conversation designed to reduce undeniable truth into competing explanations. I removed the engagement ring and placed it beside the key. Not as revenge, as a decision. Pastor Ellis faced the congregation. His voice was low. "There will be no wedding today. The family asks for prayer, privacy, and restraint." Mother Bernice came from the first pew and stood at my left. Sister Laverne stood at my right. The women did not surround me like guards. They stood like witnesses to the fact that I did not have to carry public shame alone. Celeste remained near the altar, crying without sound. I did not comfort her. Forgiveness may begin with refusing hatred. It does not begin with rescuing the person who harmed you from the weight of truth. The fellowship hall was prepared for a reception. The women's ministry asked what I wanted done. "Feed everyone," I said, "but do not call it a reception." Sister Laverne brought me tea and sat outside the women's ministry room so no one entered without permission. The culinary ministry packed meals for homebound members. The flowers were divided into smaller arrangements and sent with the food to women who had missed church because their bodies were tired. The flowers arranged to celebrate a marriage became gifts for women who needed tenderness. That was the first shape healing took. Nothing wasted. Nothing falsely named. Marcus submitted his resignation from Christian education the next morning. Greater Promise barred him from teaching or counseling in the congregation. Pastor Ellis sent a written report to the presiding elder because confidential information from premarital counseling had been used to cultivate a secret relationship with one of the people invited to counsel us. Celeste resigned from the Women's Discipleship Council. She gave a written confession to the elder and asked that it not be softened to protect her years of service. The church announced no intimate details, only breaches of counseling trust, leadership boundaries, and honesty. When some members said the matter should have remained private, Mother Bernice answered them in the hallway. Privacy is not the same as secrecy, she said. Privacy protects a wounded person. Secrecy protects the arrangement that wounded her. Those words traveled through Greater Promise more faithfully than gossip did. 3 weeks later, I met Celeste in the church garden. She told me the relationship began with long calls about Marcus's fear that I would never love him as deeply as I had loved Thomas. Celeste began comforting him. He told her she understood him better than I did. She told herself she was preventing conflict. The first time she entered his apartment alone, she knew the counseling boundary had been broken. The first overnight stay happened 6 weeks before the wedding. The final night happened after rehearsal, when Marcus told her the wedding would stabilize everything, and that confession would only humiliate me. "Why did you wait until the altar?" I asked. She looked down at the wet stones beside the path. "After you asked Pastor Ellis to delay the ceremony, I almost told him everything. I only admitted that I had crossed a boundary and needed to speak with you. He told me to do it before the vows. I lost my courage." She drew a slow breath. "Then he asked who would present you. I realized I could not answer that question with a lie. I believed that part, believing it did not restore her place in my life. I will not carry hatred for you," I said, "but you cannot return to being the woman I call before decisions. You used that place to help create the danger." She nodded. A mature boundary does not need cruelty to be final. Marcus sent letters describing the betrayal as loneliness, fear, and emotional confusion. I read one and declined the rest. An explanation may add context. It cannot turn another person's boundary into the cause of betrayal. After receiving the church's report, the presiding elder required Marcus to complete outside counseling before holding another district teaching position. Marcus chose to transfer his membership. Greater Promise did not chase him, condemn him publicly, or restore him quietly. Consequence was allowed to remain consequence. Celeste stayed. During the first 6 months, she held no office. She attended worship from a side pew, volunteered only where another leader supervised, and did not ask me for forgiveness every time we crossed paths. Her restraint became the first evidence that her repentance was not another request for access. 6 months after the wedding, I returned to the sanctuary alone before morning service. Light moved across the altar where the key had fallen. The wood held no mark. The altar had not betrayed me. The deeper question was whether the church would learn to value truth before ceremony, consent before appearance, and a woman's discernment before its own comfort. Greater Promise changed its premarital counseling policy. No family member or ministry supervisor could counsel alone. Any concern affecting consent had to be disclosed before the ceremony, not managed afterward. A policy could not heal my heart, but healing that teaches the institution nothing leaves another woman standing beneath the same flowers. I kept the handwritten vows, removed the signature page, and placed the rest in my Bible. Not because I wanted to remember Marcus, but because some promises were still true when made to my own life. I would not abandon myself to preserve a public picture. I would not call manipulation concern. I would not treat my discernment as a spiritual defect. The key was returned to Marcus in a sealed envelope through the presiding elder. I did not keep it. I did not need the object that had opened his apartment to become a permanent decoration in my healing. By the first anniversary of the wedding that never happened, Celeste still held no position. I had not restored our closeness, but I no longer changed pews when she entered. Forgiveness did not make us what we had been. It made it possible for me to see her without reopening the door she had misused. The women of Greater Promise helped me reclaim the day. Sister Laverne invited me to assist with a gathering for widows and women considering second marriages. Mother Bernice called it the discernment table. We did not teach women to fear love. We discussed consent, confidentiality, grief, and the difference between patience and self-abandonment. Prayer, we reminded them, is not a substitute for an honest answer. And we told them that postponing a wedding is painful, but entering a covenant without truth can be more painful still. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23, tells us to guard the heart, because everything we do flows from it. Guarding the heart does not mean refusing love. It means refusing to hand love the authority to silence discernment. 1 Corinthians chapter 13 says love rejoices with the truth. Love does not ask a woman to complete a ceremony so everyone else can avoid discomfort. I no longer call endurance holy when it requires me to betray what I know. I no longer call forgiveness access. I no longer call public composure peace when truth is buried beneath it. Faith did not spare me from the altar where my future changed. It gave me women who stood beside me when I chose not to proceed. Truth did not destroy my dignity. It returned my dignity before I made a promise that would have cost me more to leave. This space is for women who have learned that stopping at the edge of a wrong decision can be an act of courage, not shame. If you have ever had to choose truth while other people were protecting the picture, share only what feels safe in the comments. Your clarity may help another woman trust the quiet warning she has been taught to ignore.